Hello, everybody, and welcome to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, BJ Kubarulis, joined by all the regulars. But before we get to them, let's thank the folks that make this show possible. Of course, we're talking about our underwriters at CCI Screen Printing. For all your screen printing needs, go to 703-978-0257 or click them on the web at cciscreenprinting.com. Triple Edge Lacrosse, your positive lacrosse experience at www.tripleedgelax.com. Hey, you can click us. We're on the web too at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Videos, audio, highlights, and more at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Thanks for tuning into this all-new episode. We're going to talk all about all the record-breaking performances in this weekend's sweltering state championship tournament at Westfield High School. Of course, I'm BJ Kubarulis, joined by the Connection newspaper's Paul Frummelt, Monica Moore of the Fairfax Sports Network, and Dave Buchenfeld down on the end from the Fairfax County Times. Guys, well, we're going to agree and disagree about a lot of things throughout this 1 hour, all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report, but I think there's one thing we can agree on, and that's that the hot weather was not a fun thing to be covering sports in this weekend, but the only people that showed us up were the athletes having to run, of course, for soccer, 90 minutes throughout that sweltering heat, guys. So they made it through it. We'll get through this episode. Thanks for tuning in. If you want to see more about what we talked about here today, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com for an all-new Fast Break. Dave Buchenfeld, I hear you've got some news and notes for us coming out of some tennis news. Drew Courtney tearing it up, of course, winning some more titles.
Indeed, Drew Courtney, one of the best tennis players ever to play in the state of Virginia, just recently won his third straight state singles title and fourth straight state doubles title, which is just unbelievable. Some big news coming out of Herndon High School as well. Senior soccer player Christian McLaughlin was named the Gatorade Player of the Year for the state of Virginia, which is a very prestigious award. He scored 14 goals and had 16 assists for the Hornets this year, who won the Concord District title. He was named first team All-District, All-Region, and All-State, and he will be attending UVA in the fall. And we also had some local kids get selected in the MLB draft last week. Evan Fredrickson, formerly of Oakton, was selected 35th overall by the Milwaukee Brewers. Mike Bianucci from Woodson was selected 243rd overall by the Rangers. And Jesse Beal over there at South County was taken 416th overall by the Baltimore Orioles. Still undecided if he's going to go there or go to Maryland where he has a scholarship.
Paul Frummelt, you've got some news to share with us as well.
Just going back on Drew Courtney, that he won his 9th and 10th overall title because he's had 4 doubles titles, most recently the last 2 years with Stephen Hardy, 3 singles state titles, and the team has won 3 titles as well. So that makes 10 titles for Drew Courtney. Obviously, he's had a great career at Robinson.
Tennis doesn't always get the love that it deserves in a lot of media outlets because frankly, it's tough to cover. It's a tough sport to cover. It takes over 2.5 hours sometimes to get through. Courtney is the best player that's ever come through Virginia. That's just, you can say that without a doubt. 10 titles. The kid tore it up time and time again. His record is spotless. He's one of probably the best players in the country right now.
Heading to UVA this fall. He's actually going to go down to Charlottesville over the summer to get some workouts in. He officially goes in August. Practice starts after the first week of school, so he's jumping into college tennis now. Some
news and notes to tack on to the report here by Dave Buchenfeld and Paul Frummelt are that W.T. Woodson's going to be in search of 3 new coaches. Sharon Angelot of the girls soccer program steps down. Matt Leva of the boys soccer program steps down after 2 seasons. And our favorite here at FSN, Jen Wish, formerly Jen Carr, is headed out of the lacrosse program after 4 successful seasons. So some big shoes to fill over at W.T. Woodson. Monica, you got a chance to interview Coach Carr, Wish now. She does some refereeing at the high school and college level. She'll be pursuing that. What do you expect out of Woodson in trying to rebound after such a big loss in a coach like that?
Well, it was such a huge loss for them this year, losing Meg Thaxton with her broken arm. Otherwise, you could have expected Woodson to do even better than they did. And of course, they had such a huge win over Robinson in the Northern Region tournament before ultimately losing. And so they're going to be back next year. Of course, they're losing Sarah Vinyl and Meg Thaxton will go on, but they're a great team, and all the lessons that those players have learned from Jen Wish are going to stay with them. So they're going to be a contender next year.
Absolutely. W.T. Woodson always in the mix for some sort of region title when it comes to boys and girls lacrosse. You can expect that the boys team under Fitz over there always going to have a good year. They'll come back strong as well. Speaking of lacrosse, Let's jump right into the Triple Edge Boys Lacrosse report. The state championship was this past weekend at Westfield High School. Such a well put together event. We'll talk more about that in just a moment. But let's jump right into the bracket. Dave Buchenfeld, Chantilly got things kick-started in the first round with a win over Patrick Henry and then essentially cruised to the title.
Well, that game against Patrick Henry, I was there, ended up with a score of 22-3, but it was 20-0 after 3 quarters before they pulled all of their starters. Just a whooping, if you will. Then they faced Western Albemarle in the second round. Only won 10-5, but it was still a pretty comfortable victory. And then they squared off against Oakton for the 4th time this year in that state final and ended up winning that game 12-5 for their first ever state title.
Some other locals to mention in that bracket, of course, Oakton heading all the way into the state championship. Tony Gray, this is a story that Dave Buchenfeld from the Fairfax County Times broke about Gray telling his players at a motivational type of way a week before the game, look, this is it for me. What kind of effect do you think that had on Tony Gray's players in that championship game, which was delayed for 1 hour and 20 minutes because of lightning?
Well, a lot of them went up to him after the game, were giving him hugs, and I could hear them saying, we're sorry that we couldn't win that game for you, but he told them that no apology was necessary. He knew that they went out and gave it all they had. But 8 successful seasons for him, 3 straight state titles, made it to 2 other state finals, just a great all-around coach there.
And one of the only guys that can say he played for the Iroquois national team. I don't think anyone else can actually claim that, not in this area. All right, speaking of successful lacrosse programs, Broad Run took a fall to Oakton in the first round. Paul Frummel, they had a successful season.
Well, the Broad Run Spartans, they dominate the Dulles district and do very well in Region 2. They're a AA team out there in Ashburn. Talked to head coach Phil Truitt after the game, and he mentioned after losing to Oakton that they're trying to get more quality opponents. They're trying to kind of beef up their schedule. The only hard thing is it's hard to get Northern Region teams on their schedule because of the limited amount of games Northern Region teams play and the close relationship they have with private schools.
Well, and you can't say enough good things about the Oakton team. I mean, in their game against Albemarle, they scored 8 goals in the third quarter, and 10 Cougars scored in that game. It was an absolutely sensational effort. They had some trouble with the Albemarle goalkeeper during the first half, Gus Kramer, but they made some adjustments during the second half, went with some dodges and some extra passes, and they really came on strong. That was a sensational win for them. Although they lost to Chantilly in the final, you cannot take anything away from them on the season that they had.
Well, you mentioned Chantilly's dominant run, Oakton's ability to get to the championship game in Tony Gray's final season. And now that we've talked about the game, let's get to the highlights. Let's run through some of these highlight reel finishes. We'll see Jake Nolan's in just a minute. He went over the shoulder. That was, of course, the biggest highlight of the night. But Chantilly just came in firing. Oakton was scrappy, but it was all Chantilly at first. They took an early 4-0 lead. Monica, you were down on the sidelines for a little bit of this game. What was the feeling down there? What was kind of the rise out of the Oakton players?
Well, actually, it was more Chantilly. They had so much momentum during the first half of the game, which was so different than the Northern Region Tournament final where Oakton started off with the momentum. Chantilly came out just playing with a vengeance, and it really didn't happen until after the rain delay that Oakton started picking up a little momentum, but by then it was just too little too late. The Chargers were just too strong.
Frater with 3 goals, Jake Nolan with 2 goals. A nice wind-up shot finish there. So many different Chargers got into the mix. Kevin O'Neill was huge. Guys, what did you take away from this game?
Well, the biggest player to me was Derek Kegeris, and even after the game, Tony Gray went up to him and said, man, I wish you played a different position, because there were a lot of shots that Oakton had that could have made a difference in this game, and he just came up big, stopping him time and again.
The Chargers scoring the last 6 goals of the game. It kind of shows how much they wanted their first state title and how much they talked about it when they beat Western Albemarle in the semifinals. After the game, the seniors kind of took over the meeting and said, none of this means anything if we don't beat Oakton. You can see how charged they were during this game.
Got to mention that Nick Stevens of Oakton went bananas in the third quarter, scored 3 of their 5 goals to spark what was a bit of a comeback, but Chantilly really put the kibosh on that, coming back strong with Jake Nolan and several others scoring. I want to see if we didn't get it, didn't show it, but Jake Nolan had a phenomenal over-the-shoulder finish, guys. That was incredible. Speaking of incredible, the Chargers had an incredible season. Let's put in perspective what they were able to do. Let's jump right into it and show you their dominant, first off, regular season run, guys. There it is. There's the results. Frankly, no one touched Chantilly throughout this entire season. Their biggest competition within their first couple of games was 13-10 victory over Robinson, and I believe that game right there told them this is a changing of the guard. Robinson winning the first 2 official state championships. Chantilly wins that game, and then you see they just dominate their way through.
Well, it was big for their confidence. That was the first time they had ever beaten Robinson in the history of their lacrosse program, so it was huge for their confidence, and they just kept rolling from there.
Speaking of rolling, they rolled through the postseason. Let's see these postseason results, starting, of course, with the district tournament. See, they are district champs, Paul, with a win over Oakton. That, frankly, was the closest game they had all year.
It's a year of first for the Chargers, and they got their first Concord district win when they beat Oakton by 2 goals, 9-7. Going through the region tournament, beating Washington Lee, Woodson, Westfield, Oakton again, again a 2-goal difference there. Their first Northern Region championship.
And I think that the huge thing for Chantilly this season, the real secret to their success was they had so many different players who could score goals. In the state championship game, you had both Corey Afariat and Joe Fratter with 3 goals, Ian Mills and Jake Nolan with 2 goals. And against Patrick Henry, 15 different Chargers scored, 18 got a point, so either a goal or an assist. And having that much offensive firepower, how can you not have a perfect season?
And guys, speaking of how can you not rank the Chargers #1 to finish the season? Will there be controversy? Were the Chargers not ranked #1? Let's jump right into the rankings and find out. Okay, they are. Just kidding. Just kidding, folks. Stay on your couch there. Chantilly with a 20-0 perfect season. Their first ever in lacrosse history at that school stays atop the polls. The Triple Edge lacrosse rankings, Dave, followed by the Cougars of Oakton.
Oh, you see Oakton #2, and finally, my Annandale Adams are getting some love here. They're not down at #7 like they were the whole season. They finally jump up to #3. They were the 3rd team in the state tournament this year.
Langley under Earl Brewer takes the 4th spot.
You can see Westfield there at #5. It's a tough season for Westfield. There always seems like being also-rans in the Concord District and the Northern Region. When are the Bulldogs going to get their chance at a title?
That's right, and Dave, you had a little story about Westfield and kind of a changing of the guard there, a controversial changing of the guard, if you will, under Coach Gary Maum, essentially his staff walking.
Yeah, it's a big story. He hasn't been able to give all the details yet. He's been told he shouldn't, give all the nitty-gritty of it, but basically some things were said by the administration at Westfield that he didn't agree with, and when they didn't rescind their statements, he and his assistant coaches basically put in their resignations and left on their own terms, thinking that they weren't really being appreciated by the Westfield administration over there.
Unfortunate to lose such a great staff. They all did a lot of good work over there with the Bulldogs, including Madison. Look at their season under A.J. Sobolski, the great player for them. He had a standout season. Robinson, W.T. Woodson, Lake Braddock, and West Springfield rounding out our top 10. You can find those rankings at FairfaxSportsNetwork.com. We mentioned Chantilly at 20-0, finishes off a fantastic dream season, guys. Dave Buchenfeld got a chance to catch up with a couple of Chargers that were all amped up, dropping some funny side notes, anecdotes, inside jokes, and more here on this post-game state championship interview.
5 members of the Chantilly Chargers, the new state champions here in Virginia. Now, Derek, I saw Coach Gray from Oakton saying he wished you played a different position, made a lot of big saves out there. Just talk about your performance and some of those saves you made this game.
I made that first big save during that first quarter. That's what I asked for. Get the team pumped, get them going, and then we got goals.
Jake, you had that great shot over your shoulder. I saw Kevin do that against them in the region final. Did he teach that one to you?
He teaches me everything I know. Honestly, I've never done it behind the back in the game, and I just really wanted to do it. So I didn't really have to shoot, but it was worth it.
Now, Ian, 16 seniors on the team. What does it mean to you guys to go out on top like this?
Gui, it feels awesome. It feels good.
All right, Kevin, as a captain, what did you say to the guys in the locker room? You had over an hour sitting in there during the lightning delay. What did you say to keep you guys fired up out there?
We actually had like a crazy dance party in the locker room. Just turned off the lights and turned up the music and worked out.
Did you guys know that you guys were going to be this good this season at the beginning of the year?
We had a lot of confidence in our team, and we took it one game at a time. We weren't really focusing on being overconfident.
All right, anything else you guys want to add?
Gui?
In your head, we agree. Dance party and Gui, I don't know. Have fun with it, boys. You won a state title. You earned it. Dave, why don't you drop some final numbers on the Chantilly Chargers?
You guys know that I love my stats, and here's a couple stats for you from this season with Chantilly. They outscored their opponents in their 20 games 260 to 76. 260 to 76. And they were always talking about getting one more pass. Of those 260 goals, they had 182 assists. which is 70% of their goals had an assist on them, which is just phenomenal.
I remember we came in during our preview and Paul Frummelt said, Chantilly, everybody's talking about the Chargers, and I had my doubts, healthy doubts. I didn't want to say they wouldn't do it, but it was a program that had never been there before, and I think they certainly proved all those doubters wrong. Paul Frummelt, you seem to think it has a lot to do with their one more philosophy.
We've talked about that throughout the year. Their one more pass, one more goal, one more game. And I talked to head coach Kevin Broderick just yesterday, and I said, one more, there's no more now. What are you going to do? And he goes, I don't know. And I talked to Mike Quigg as well, and he said, well, I guess our new motto is no more. They have no more they need to accomplish. They've accomplished it all this year.
Well, we still got a lot more left here on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. Thanks for tuning in and sticking with us on this state tournament recap. Of course, if you want more news, notes, and knowledge, go to fairfaxsportsnetwork.com, where we've got some fast breaks for you. That's right. We'll be on video talking more about what we talked about here today. Monica Moore, you got a chance to cover this girls lacrosse season all the way through, and you got to cap it off with Oakton winning the state championship. Why don't you run us through their dominant season in the postseason? Didn't always start off that way. Let's get into this bracket.
Well, you know, if Chantilly wants perhaps one more state title so they can start following after the Oakton girls, because that's right, the Oakton girls, we actually have that wrong, it looks like, on the graphic, because the Oakton girls were victorious in the state lacrosse final. So let's talk about how they got there. They had a very easy game against Forest Park, winning 27-5. Of course, Ashley Keminer was the huge story in that game with 8 goals. Then they struggled a little bit against Loudoun Valley. They were down 6-2 at the half, down 9-6 in the second half before they just came alive. And the big story of that game was Ashley Keminer did not have the game that she had been having all throughout the season. She was limited to 3 goals. I know some people are out there thinking, well, 3 goals is pretty good, but for Ashley Keminer, that's a tough night. But some of her teammates really stepped up. Blair Keffer had 5 goals. Jackie Alexander and Lauren Matthew, 2 players that were brought up from the JV team, were huge for them. Now, Chantilly, on the other hand, had to play broad run during the opening game for them, and then they had a tough game against Albemarle. They also struggled a little bit, and for them it was Brittany Grill who had 6 goals, helping them to get to the state final.
Our Cracker Jack staff back there gets in there, gets the eraser on the pencil, throws Oakton in the bracket, and all is good in the lacrosse world, Dave Buchenfeld.
Well, you just got to feel so bad for this Chantilly girls lacrosse team. They had 3 losses this year in every single final. In the district final to Robinson on a last-second goal, to Oakton in the region final, and then again to Oakton in the state final. Just a phenomenal season, but they got nothing to show for it.
And this is a team that beat Oakton twice to start out the year, and then Oakton comes back and beats them twice, once here in the state championship game. You really got to feel bad for the Chargers.
Monica Moore was on the sidelines during this game, and she got a chance to watch all the action. Ashley Keminer went bananas, as we all thought she would. She got a red card, rather 2 yellows in last year's state championship, and tossed. She got to finish this one. She finished off a great career. Let's watch her in some of these FSN highlights. Monica, walk us through the action.
Well, Oakton got off to such a quick start. Within about the first minute and 21 seconds, 3 different Cougars scored, and it wasn't Keminer. It was actually Sarah Beth Rupp and then Blair Keffer and then Brittany Patriarca that got on the board first for Oakton, and then Oakton just continued their dominance. But I think a lot of people were surprised because Keminer was quiet in the early goings, and some of her teammates stepped up, picking up right where they had left off against Loudoun Valley. And certainly the Chargers also got a lot of help from Brittany Grill, Liz Dunwoody, and Katie Stillwell. Brittany finished with 4 goals. Liz and Katie both finished with 3 goals. But one huge story of the game was that 6 Cougars other than Ashley Keminer scored in the game. And Erin Sensenbaugh, one of their seniors, had 5 goals, a huge contribution for the Cougars. Tori Morgan, their goalkeeper, coming up big, as well as Lisa Gavron and Kayla Hofer, 2 other seniors on the defensive end for the Cougars. So they just got great play all around from all of the team, and they just played a sensational team game.
Absolutely. The Cougars charged back after going 5-5 throughout district tournament play. Monica, you got a chance to catch up with some of these players after the game, and really it was all about redemption for a team that was battered and called out all year that their time had passed. And I think they proved that, and Ashley Keminer proved that certainly their time is now.
Well, a lot of people were talking about that she got looked over for Concord District Player of the Year and Northern Region Player of the Year, and then the fact that a lot of people, after Oakton was the 4 seed in the Concord District Tournament, just did not expect for them to be in the state tournament, and so they felt like they had a lot to prove, and they're losing 6 seniors off this team, and it's a big 6. It's Keminer, Morgan, Sensenbaugh, Patriarca, Gavron and Kayla Hofer, but people in the region have to be asking themselves whether they can do it again next year.
You mentioned do it again. Ashley Keminer goes from scoring those goals that you just saw on your screen right into the draw control center where she was dominant all night, guys. I mean, she does it all for this team. You ask Coach Jean Counts about it, and she'll tell you, without Ashley, this team would have been nothing all year. I think that says something about the special player she is, because a coach never says that. A coach always talks about the team and how important the team is. You know, Counts did say that it was great that they went through this tournament run because other players stepped up around Ashley, but they certainly would not have gotten to this point without her.
I think a major turning point for the Cougars is that district tournament loss to Chantilly when Keminer didn't get many touches on the ball at all. She was mostly working in the midfield towards the defense. And when I asked Coach Jean Counts after the game, she said, I wish we could split her in two because we needed her here and we needed her here. Well, after that game, they had her right up front scoring those goals. I think it was a major turning point for the Cougars.
All right, we got a long ways to go in this state championship wrap-up show on the Fairfax Sports Report. Let's jump in, though, to these triple-edged lacrosse girls rankings. Monica Moore, it's your world, your show. Walk us through it.
Well, no surprise that Oakton finishes out the season on top, followed by Chantilly. Now, I'm a little surprised here because Robinson is in the number 3 position. I somewhat expected for Westfield to be there. Of course, they were the 3rd team from the Northern region that made it into the state tournament. Robinson lost to WT Woodson in the Northern region tournament. So a little surprised to see Robinson in the 3 position and then Westfield at number 4. We've already talked about WT Woodson. Jen Wish's team just had a great season, and but for that injury to Meg Thaxton, I think they could have gone even further. And then there's my Stonebridge Bulldogs. I talked and raved about them all season. They ran into a roadblock of Chantilly during the Northern Region tournament. But first-year coach Kristen Howard has to be really proud of her Bulldogs, and they have Lauren Giusti coming back, so they're going to be strong.
I'm glad to see I'm not the only one that always has problems with these rankings.
And then finishing up, Annandale in the 7th place position, West Springfield, Langley, and then Madison, a new addition. Remember, they defeated Annandale. That was one of the huge upsets in the Northern Region tournament. And again, one of my big stories at the beginning of the year was whether Madison would shock some people. And so I'm glad to see that they came on strong during the Northern Region tournament, and they finish up in the 10th place spot.
You know who came on strong at the end of the year was Ashley Keminer and the Oakton Cougars. The 2008 state champions. Monica Moore got a chance to catch up with Ashley and Jean Counts after the state championship victory.
Thanks, guys. I am standing here with Ashley Keminer and Jean Counts of Oakton, the 3-time state champions in a row. Now, Ashley, by my count, you had quite a number of goals in this tournament. What was the highlight of the state tournament for you?
Just winning this game is the biggest because we lost twice in the season and then we won regionals, and then winning this is, I guess the biggest. So.
And coming into this season, you all lost so many players from last year's state championship team. What was your mindset coming into the season, and how has this season lived up to your expectations?
The seniors, had to step it up because we lost, like you said, lost a lot. So we just needed to step it up and be leaders on the team. And that's what we did.
And tonight, a lot of your teammates stepped up quickly on the offensive end. Could you talk a little bit about their play early on?
Blair Keffer having, I guess, quite a goals, and Aaron Sensabaugh being wide open at the on the crease, I guess, and just getting in the goal and seeing that. So I'm trying to think of.
Well, so many of your teammates stepped in. Now, Coach, of course, you played Chantilly 4 times this season. What do you think was the huge difference tonight?
I think the difference, the last 2 games, I would say, is just the belief in each other. It's, we're not just about one player, but we're also patient. We were patient offensively, defensively, just kind of doing the things, the basics. We always talk about basics no matter what level. We're talking about, good catches, good throws, things like that. So.
You started off the season 4-5, and then you won your last 7 in a row. What do you think was the big difference between early on in the season and finishing up in the postseason?
The fact that we were having more people contribute. We can't have, just a few people, having goals and draw controls and things like that. What we did, and it kind of, we kind of peaked today, which is, good timing on our part, but having everybody step up and pitch in, whenever it needed to be, whether it was a draw control or a loose ball in the midfield or a goal or stepping up big time on defense. So we're all pitching in, putting a hand in it, and it's ours as a group.
Well, congratulations to you both on a huge win today.
The Chargers peaked at the right time. A state championship victory for the Cougars. That's right, the Cougars. They're the ones that won the state championship. Stick with us here on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. When we come back on the other side of this break, we're going to talk a little football and a little baseball and softball. Stick with us. That happy note, welcome back to this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm your host, BJ Kubaroulis. Thanks for tuning into this state championship wrap-up here on the Fairfax Sports Report. If you want to get more news and notes, audio, video, and more, go check out our video fast breaks at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Of course, I'm joined by Paul Frummelt of the Connection newspapers, Monica Moore of the Fairfax Sports Network, and Dave Buchenfeld of the Fairfax County Times. Guys, let's jump right into this boys state championship soccer bracket where Seth Goldman and the Robinson Rams pushed their way through 1-0 victories all the way into that state championship game where they suffered a shutout to a great deep run team. Brian Ownby, a University of Virginia bound forward/midfielder, Monica, really dominated this game, set up what essentially was the game winner early in the 12th minute, and Robinson, with Seth Goldman hampered by a knee injury, really just had no answer for that crisp attack.
I think that was a huge story of the game, BJ, was Seth Goldman's injury. He sat out the first 33 minutes or so. When he came into the game, Robinson finally took a shot. That's how important he is to his team, and they just struggled all game. And certainly, Robinson has been a team that's had trouble finding the net all year. They're a low-scoring team, and then when you have Deep Run, a team that in the semifinals with 6-0, there was just a question about whether they could counter all that offensive firepower. With Brian Ownby, he matched up with Brian Wharton to score that goal, and you said he's going to the University of Virginia. This guy's all district, all region, all state. He plays on the under-18 national team. He's played in Lisbon for the national team. So he is an all-star and was just a tough player for Robinson to match up with all night.
Central Region Player of the Year. You usually see a Northern Region team being the more dominant one in the state championship. Dave Buchenfeld.
Well, for so much of the season, it was all about Seth Goldman and the seniors for that Robinson team. But with him injured in the postseason, they had a lot of underclassmen that really stepped up. You talk about Alex McCumbee, just a sophomore, scored the game winners against both Cox in the first round and Thomas Dale, both 1-0 wins in those games. Wasn't able to get another goal in that state final, but he played a great tournament.
All right, speaking of a great game, a great tournament, let's jump right into the boys soccer highlights from a sweltering hot day at Westfield High School. And in the early goings, Dominguez in goal for the Rams. He was huge. He was really a bright spot for a Rams defense that really struggled, guys.
Well, he only gave up one goal in that state title game right there.
And that was it, the game winner from Ownby to Wharton.
The only goal he gave up the entire state tournament. Against that caliber of play, to only give up one goal in 3 games is just phenomenal.
And you have to remember that during the game against Thomas Dale, they had 2 point-blank shots that he stopped. He stopped another point-blank shot in this game. He is an outstanding goalkeeper. He's 6'4", so he has quite a presence back in the goal. This was his 2nd year in goal, and he has just improved so much for Robinson. He was a huge story for them. Of course, he is a senior. He will be graduating, and that is one player they are going to have to find a very good replacement for, because those are some big shoes to fill. Now, on the other end of it, Cameron Murray, who's the goalkeeper for Deep Run, also sensational. He's going to be playing at VMI next year. And during the second half, when Robinson just completely came alive, he was tested twice and was strong both times for Deep Run. He has had a great year. 17 shutouts this year for Deep Run. This was their 17th against Robinson. Most of those have been attributed to Cameron Murray. They've been outstanding, and they have so much offensive firepower that when you have both of those components together, it's hard to believe that you couldn't win a state title.
Well, and you look at Jack Sakala, head coach at Robinson. We have a lot of great coaches around the Northern Region, but he's got to be right up at the top of the list. Has 4 state titles to his resume with Lake Braddock, and then, first year with the Rams, bringing them all the way to the state finals, just phenomenal.
Speaking of Rams, the soccer program has been a good one for the boys. Let's get into the girls bracket where, the girls had such a great run this season. They won their final 17 games, the Rams did. Catherine Yount in goal had 10 shutouts. I must mention that the equalizing goal after Battlefield scored was an assist from Jensen Smith to Stephanie Johnson near the right post. Leanne Baxter scored the 88th minute game winner in double overtime against a fourth-year program in Battlefield that's an up-and-coming squad.
Well, in this heat, for a lot of the game, the Rams looked a little sluggish out there, and they said that, rather than hanging their heads after they got that goal scored on them with about 14 minutes to play in the game, it was kind of like a slap in the face that woke them up, and then 23 seconds later they put the ball in the back of the net to tie it.
And that was kind of the story of Robinson for the tournament, is that also against Woodbridge scored a goal at the half going up 2-1, and then 49 seconds into the second half, Robinson countered. So those wake-up calls have been coming all season, and they've responded so quickly, and that's such a credit to them and their team.
Absolutely, and they were without Audrey Berry, who was in this tournament, all season. 18 goals, 10 assists. She's a sophomore. She's frankly getting looks from everyone in the country. She's one of the best players, has the best foot, speed, and skill in the northern region. Just a great finisher. They were without her. It showed. They had trouble finishing, but they were able to finally do that in double overtime. Monica Moore got a chance to catch up with Coach Jim Reich, who took home his 444th career win, 28 seasons. Coming back next year, put all those rumors to rest. Jim Reich will return trying to win a 6th state title. Is it too soon to start that talk? Never. Here at the Fairfax Sports Report, Monica Moore got a chance to hunt down Coach Reich after the game. Of course, some more highlights here, guys, as we got a chance to watch the girls try to put away Battlefield. We'll get to that interview in just a minute. But as you see, the girls, they just couldn't finish, and that was partially due as Catherine Yount gets a big save there. They were peppering the goal. They just couldn't make them count, and Battlefield just trying to get by Yount eventually did.
Yeah, and Catherine Yount was a little frustrated during the first half as she was talking to her defenders, and she didn't feel like they were listening to her as much. But you have to give a lot of credit to Robinson's back line, Monica Cremens, Allie Heck, and Cole Miller. They played almost the entire game, and they were facing two sensational forwards from Battlefield. Zahar Flocky, someone that people have talked a lot about, Jessie Jewell, two sensational players who have scored a lot this year. Look at this right here.
That was the
there.
Cross from Jensen to Stephanie Johnson. It was just a great, equalizer there, and Leanne Baxter on the game winner. Here's the dominance exhibited by Robinson in their run to a state championship, 21-1, Paul.
17-game win streak to end the season. They scored 62 goals, only allowed 14. That's 10 shutouts for Yount and the Robinson defense. Robinson now has 5 state championships along with Lake Braddock and West Springfield, all with 5.
And it could be 6 and 7 by the time this is all said and done. They've got a Class Dave coming back with 9 starters. Catherine Yount was the All-Met Player of the Year. They lose her, but Kristen Smith, both of those players going to William and Mary. But you've got Allie Heck on defense, Annie Hovland, Leanne Baxter, Audrey Berry. Superstars of the Northern region coming back.
Well, they got 9 starters and 17 players overall coming back. And one of the people that weren't starters, Stephanie Johnson, scored that tying goal. She was in the starting lineup in the state final because Audrey Berry was out. But Coach Reich said she was probably the most improved player this entire season for them. Started off on the bench, just making the team, then was the first one off the bench to starting in the state final.
To give a little more credit to the Robinson defense, we mentioned Flocky and Jewell. They combined for 58 goals heading into the game. Now, Robinson heading into the game had only 60 goals heading into that game, so you can see how dominant those two forwards were for Battlefield.
Absolutely, and Flacky's coming back, 33 goals on the season, so don't be surprised to see Battlefield, a fourth-year program from the Haymarket area, maybe push their way back and maybe a rematch next year. Guys, I know we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's see what Coach Jim Reich had to say after the game. He caught up with Monica Moore.
Thanks, guys. Well, I am standing here with Leanne Baxter, our player of the game, and Coach Jim Reich of the state champion Robinson Rams. First of all, Leanne, you had that amazing goal in the second overtime. Kristen Norkus had just made an unbelievable save. What was going through your mind when you took that shot?
Just hoping it went in.
And certainly you also had the assist in the first half on Stephanie Johnson's shot. What was going through your mind as you set up that play for your teammate?
We just came out there, did what we had to do, just all played together.
And certainly one of the big stories of today's game was how hot it was. How do you think that impacted your team's play?
I think it affected both teams, but you just had to learn to push through it and give it all you have.
And how does it feel to be a state champion?
It was awesome.
Now, Coach, your team played great in the second half and certainly in those overtimes. What were you most pleased with about your team's play in the second half?
Well, we talked at halftime about keeping a composure, the fact that both teams were playing in the in the same heat, both were feeling the same effect, and I basically said that whoever made the first mistake was probably going to lose the game. And I said, but should something happen, don't lose your composure. And this is the third time this year that we've been behind, and within less than 2 minutes we came back and tied the game up. It says a lot about the kids. There's a lot of fight in these kids. And then during halftime we said, just keep doing what you're doing, just keep being patient. One thing I did notice throughout the game that their goalie was very aggressive off the line, and we said try to use that, try to draw her off the line, and then open up the goal a little bit and get a chance to finish, and that's what we got on the goal in overtime. And I don't think the girls wanted to go into sudden death. They'd had enough of the heat.
And certainly, Coach, speaking of composure, your team has had a bullseye on its back the entire year. You started out ranked #1 in the state. Can you talk a little bit about your team's thought process throughout the season as you were going through it, and the composure throughout the entire season?
Well, we talked about that early on. We started focusing on the fact that we did well last year. We had a lot of people coming back, and everybody was expecting us to do well this year. And I think it was a weight on their shoulders. And it's a relief now to live up to the expectations that everybody had. But it was something we dwelt with all year long. Is you are going to have a target on your back, and just go out and play each game one at a time and do the best you can.
Now, Coach, you've certainly won 5 state championships, 10 regional titles. You were inducted into the Virginia High School Coaches Hall of Fame this year. But certainly everything is special. What makes this state championship so special for you?
I think probably the most important thing here is how the kids bonded this year as a team. They're more like sisters than they are teammates. And we focus on that. We work on that. It's part of our system because you don't want to let your sister down. In a big game, when the kind of team these kids were this year, the way they bonded, they play for each other, and that's what we focus on. We want the kids to play for each other.
Well, congratulations, Coach. Congratulations, Leanne. A great win today.
Thanks very much.
All right, so you got a chance to see Coach Jim Reich talk about his 5th state championship there, but one guy that often doesn't get enough credit, that does a lot to help these Rams be so successful, one of the most successful programs in schools, athletic programs rather, this year within the state. Can't even tell you how many state championships they've won, but I'll tell you one guy, and certainly can tell you that stat if I know Mike McGurk, who's on the line with us now. Mike, how many state championships did you guys win this year?
We won 3, and we were runners-up in 2 others.
Absolutely. All right, Mike, so breaking news coming across my desk in the form of something written on a napkin. You're leaving Robinson. That's breaking news. Didn't even know about this. And coming into the show tonight, Mike, why don't you walk us through, had a great career as a DSA at Robinson. Where are you going and why?
I'm actually heading to Jefferson City, Missouri, Jefferson City High School in Jefferson City, Missouri. And my wife's parents live about an hour from there. Her brother and his family live about 20 minutes from the high school. Her grandmother lives out in Kansas City, and we as a family just made a decision that we wanted a little bit of a slower pace of life. It just gets crazy around here. You get used to the traffic and used to all the craziness, and we just decided as a family we wanted to take a little step back and see how life is in the Midwest.
Mike, when did this first idea get into your head, and when did you decide to go through with it?
We had talked about it at the turn of the year in January, and just started looking around, and this is a really good fit. The school is about 2,800 students, and so it's very similar as far as Robinson goes, both academically and athletically. The track team there, the girls' track team, has won 4 straight championships. Their football team won 4 state championships in the 90s. So it's another successful program, both, like I said, academically and athletically.
Well, speaking of successful programs, I know there have been a lot of highlights of your career at Robinson, and certainly there were some this past weekend getting past the heat. But so could you tell us about some of your favorite highlights from your career there?
Certainly the most recent ones are great. The girls' soccer team winning a state championship was really kind of special for me because as some people know, I would get out and practice with them a couple of times a week. In fact, this season I'll admit to breaking my foot at one of the practices, and I was in a boot for 5 weeks. So that was kind of special for me. Seeing our boys' basketball team get back on track and get into the regionals and winning a game and then losing to West Springfield, that was pretty great. And then watching Percy Harvin in the state championship football game my second year at Robinson was pretty amazing, as well as the first year I was at Robinson. If you remember, both Westfield and Robinson were undefeated. It was the biggest gate we've ever had at a regional championship football game. We didn't win that game, but the atmosphere and the caliber of play at those games were truly amazing. Of course, there's other sports. Boys lacrosse winning back-to-back state championships was pretty amazing. And then, the tennis team with Drew Courtney, what a show he put on, winning 4 doubles championships, 3 singles, and leading the team to 3 state championships. So, I can't really pick out one program, but obviously it's been very successful. And with the move from the Patriot to the Concord, our kids and our coaches stepped up and really competed at the top level with that move, and didn't really look back at that at all. So I feel pretty good about that too.
Now, Mike, in addition to all the sports, you formed a lot of relationships in your time here. What are some of the non-sports memories that you're going to take with you, including with some of us sports writers here?
Well, it's funny. I got on you guys about getting on the show, and it takes me having to leave to go to another state to finally get put on. But, that's the one thing I'm going to miss the most is the relationships. I've been here forever. I went to Chantilly and George Mason and started coaching at Lake Braddock when I was a junior in college. So leaving the people is going to be awful tough, especially the guys at Sports Network with Brian Nern. I mean, I feel like every time there's a game, I get an email from him, can we come over and video, or can we do this? And, you guys have been real good to me and real good to Robinson as far as fair coverage, and you guys do a great job of promoting the student athletes with limited access, and you guys do a great job with that. I mean, you think about the channels that we can get out to folks about communicating what our kids are doing and the special interest stories, and you guys covered on the TV shows and the newspapers. But and of course the ADs. Mark Martino is my coach in high school, and I've known him since I was a sophomore in high school, which was 1987. So we're going on 20 years where I've known him, and Doug Ewell, who I went to middle school with. We've been boys for that long, so that's those are the relationships that I'm going to miss the most.
All right, Mike, want to thank you for joining us on this all-new episode of the Fairfax Sports Report. Best of luck to you headed out to Missouri, but before we let you go, I got to quiz you a little bit, my man, see if you've been doing your research. All right, I'm going to start the fight song for the Jefferson City Jays and see if you can finish it. It starts off, on Jeff City, fight right through that line, take the ball.
I know the ends, let's go Jays, and I don't know the rest. And I know the colors are red and white. That's about as good as I can get right now.
All right, Mike McGurk, certainly one of the best athletic directors that has come through this area in quite some time, put his stamp on a Robinson program that has been so successful in so many different aspects. Best of luck to you down the road.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it.
All right, guys. So a big loss, obviously, for the Northern region, not just for Robinson. Anybody that knows Mike McGurk knows that he has a lot to do with helping to make some of the decisions that affect student athletes in more ways than just on the field, in the back meetings and more. McGurk has certainly been a good voice for the student athletes. So a big loss. And speaking of losses and wins, let's get back into this state tournament talk, guys. Of course, baseball, Lake Braddock suffered a rough road in the state championship. Let's jump into that bracket. Paul Frummel, you got a chance to catch up with the Bruins.
Well, Lake Braddock in that first round beating Indian River in a game that felt like it took 2 weeks to finish with the rain delays. Coming in against Colonial Forge, they dropped down 0-2 to the Eagles before coming back, scoring 5 runs and another run in the 5th to make it 6-4. Bringing in Brian Durner, who's been their ace all year, the great pitcher for the Bruins. He gives up 3 runs in the bottom of the 6th inning to give Colonial Forge the win and end Lake Braddock season, snapping their 20-game winning streak.
I was just going to say that they just had a phenomenal year this year. 20 straight wins like that, and to lose in a heartbreaker like that is just really a shame, because a lot of people felt like they had a good shot at bringing the state title back to Northern Virginia.
And again, the Bruins winning their 2nd Northern Region title in 3 years. It seemed like it happened so abruptly. They're cruising towards a semifinal win, and all of a sudden, the Colonial Forge puts on 3 runs, and Lake Braddock only has a half an inning to respond, not able to hitting two balls hard, but into foul territory. The right fielder made 2 great great grabs to end their season.
I think the quote that summed it up for me, Shane Halley saying it was like salt in the wound.
He said he didn't want it to end like this. Same thing with Shannon Mark, the Northern Region MVP, saying this is not how we pictured things ending. Again, very abrupt, and all the Bruins were hit pretty hard by the loss.
There's your bracket. Chantilly falling in the first round. Lake Braddock going as far as the semis, but Colonial Forge, the last local team standing from the Prince William area. James River taking the title.
And another thing to point out about the Bruins is they played most of this season without Halley being on the mound. He was their ace last year on the mound, had an arm problem, didn't start pitching until the end of the year, and even when he came back, could only go a few innings at a time because he didn't have the endurance built up. But just a great season for those guys.
Brian Durner, he was a revelation for the Bruins this year, just pitching outstanding. Halley came in, pitched an inning and a third against Colonial Forge, a shutout ball. Brian Durner came in and he was cruising until that fateful 6th inning.
But guys, you have to talk about James River, who this was their second state championship in a row, and a lot of people did not think that they were going to be there. They lost 10 starters off of last year's team, and most of those players had played Little League together. They had great team chemistry, whereas this year they came back with Austin Stadler and Daniel Mars, two of their pitchers, but they had a lot of work to make up, and they struggled during the early goings of the season, but really came on strong during the playoffs and defeating Colonial Forge quite definitively.
Monica Moore solidifying her spot as a analyst here for the next 5 years on the Fairfax Sports Report, dropping knowledge on James River. Guys, we are all shamed.
And you can't stop talking about baseball without mentioning Chantilly. What a great year they had. Made it to the region final, losing a heartbreaker to Lake Braddock, and then had a tough one down, had to travel to the Eastern Shore to play Bethel in the first round of the state tournament. Fell to those guys 4-2. You look at Pat Summers, Matt Langford, Keith Morris, or all those guys. First time ever in the state tournament for those guys. It was a great year for them as well.
Great seasons all around here in the state championship edition of the Fairfax Sports Report. I'm BJ Kubarulis, joined by all the regulars. Of course, Paul Frummelt, our new regular Monica Moore, Dave Buchenfeld here on this state tournament recap. If you want more of this, you can get it online at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com, where we've got some great insight in some videos, articles, news notes, and more bells and whistles at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. Let's jump into softball as we round out this state championship edition. Paul Frummelt, you tracked the hurlers of the Diamond all year long. Why don't you walk us through what the regular powerhouses from this area were able to do? Looks like no one got past the first round.
It was not a good year for the Northern Region in the state tournament. Westfield losing to Woodside, and Herndon being no-hit by Hickory. Now Hickory, who ended up winning the tournament, was an interesting story. Their pitcher, Jen Gnatic, no-hit Herndon, and then no-hit deep run. 2 straight no-hitters to reach the final game. Beating Battlefield, she allowed 8 hits against Battlefield, but had a huge solo home run for her team to help secure the Hickory victory 4-0. But Westfield, a huge story, winning their first Northern Region tournament this year with the majority of freshmen on their team, so didn't get past the first round of the state tournament, but still a very successful season for the Bulldogs.
I just want to hear you say Hickory victory like 5 times in a row and see if you can get through that, guys. What else, Monica? What else do we not know about this bracket?
Well, I think you have to talk a little bit about this Battlefield team. Battlefield, of course, in their 4th year of existence. I got to see the soccer game, didn't actually get to see the softball game, but you have to talk about how amazing it was that they were in this state tournament final. They started off 4 years ago and went 4-17. In fact, they had one game that season where 16 runs were scored against them in the first inning. They lost that game 32-1, and then 4 years later, they're in the state final. And after the game, they got a great compliment from Hickory's catcher, Michelle Light, and she said that that's the best anyone has hit against Jen Nyadek all season. And so I think that Battlefield has to take away a lot of good things from this season, because just absolutely sensational that they were there. They were looking for the first state championship for their school.
And Battlefield, you mentioned allowing 16 runs in 1 inning. That starting pitcher, Brittany Black, started the game for Battlefield, but the heat, it was getting up to about 95 degrees. We were all there seeing how hot it was. She had to take herself out of the game in the 2nd inning, and that hurt the Bobcats, obviously. Also with her bat, she was their leading run producer.
And you talk about Herndon, it was another disappointing end of the year. But Katie Reinex missed so much time with the broken ankle, came back to lead them to the region title game, obviously lost to Westfield. They've been talking the last few years, they've never won a title in either district, region, or state. wanting to get something up on their banner. Unfortunately, didn't happen this year as well. But they just ran into a buzzsaw against Hickory in the first round. Losing to the eventual state champion is nothing to be ashamed of.
And that was a 2-0 final. So obviously Rhinex also was a pitcher's duel, and she held up her end. But if you're no hit, you can't. There's not much you can do in the runs department.
All right, guys, so it's been a great state championship edition of the Fairfax Sports Report. Got just a couple of minutes left to round out our final thoughts of the season. Each of us was responsible for covering a certain sport. Monica did a great job with lacrosse, Dave with baseball, Paul with softball. Let's run through some of the sports, and over the next just a couple of minutes each, just a couple of highlights from the season. Dave, we'll start with you talking about baseball.
Well, baseball, you got to talk about Lake Braddock making it all the way to the state tournament, making it farther than anyone else. Everybody was thinking Oakton was going to be the last one standing, but the Bruins proved a lot of people wrong. Had that 20-game win streak that was snapped in the semifinals there, but it was just a great season for those guys.
Monica got a chance to cover lacrosse, the girls lacrosse scene all year on our Triple Edge Girls Lacrosse Report, where she did a great job, question and answer sessions on the website and more. You got to see the Oakton Cougars go all the way to a state championship. What are some other highlights from this great season of girls lacrosse?
Well, it has to be Chantilly. We didn't get to talk a lot about them today, but one thing you have to know about this team is they are a lot of underclassmen. Brittany Grill, Liz Dunwoody, Katie Stillwell, and Heather Morale, their goalkeeper, are all going to be back. They're only losing 6 seniors, and so you can only look for them to come back a lot tougher after what they've suffered this year. As Dave said, losing in the district tournament, region tournament, and state tournament, that's going to build a lot of character, a lot of strength for them, and they are going to be a powerhouse next year.
Paul Frummel did our softball coverage all year with some spot coverage and some other sports as well. Picks up the scraps for us with tennis and all the sports that the rest of us, frankly, are just too dumb to understand. So, Paul, why don't you walk us through some other Northern Region highlights of some other athletes?
Well, starting with softball, my favorite story and my favorite preseason quote this year was from Westfield head coach Dean Farrington. They lost a bunch of seniors, and he told me, "We are still learning to tie our shoes." Flash forward a couple months, and they won their first ever Northern Region title with using 3 freshman pitchers filling in for Linda Pirro, who graduated last year. So that was my favorite story in softball. And again, we mentioned Drew Courtney at the beginning of the show, how dominating he has been. He's swept the doubles tournament since he's been at Robinson, winning 4 consecutive doubles tournaments. Since he was a sophomore, winning all the singles tournaments. The team has won 3 state tournaments while he's been there. He's one of the most dominating athletes that this region has ever seen.
All right, so there's your wrap up on those sports. Let's jump into soccer. I got a chance to cover a lot of good soccer this year. Seth Goldman, obviously a big story for the Robinson Rams that, for the boys, made it into the state championship final. Weren't able to pull it off there, but what a great run they went on to go through that season and come from where they came from throughout a great Concord District tournament, Northern Region tournament, and more. The last Northern Region team standing out of some great talent. Stonebridge with the Shabans having a great season. A.J. Shetta for Westfield, one of the best players that's come through in quite some time. Got to mention Herndon on a great run. Fell a little bit short of their state championship aspirations with Sean Murnane and Christian McLaughlin, but I think the story of the year for boys soccer might have been Jefferson, after doing what they did last year, winning a state championship and coming back, and without so many players having such a successful season, winning the Liberty District tournament. For girls soccer, it was the Robinson Rams. Jensen Smith with a great assist as an equalizer early in the state championship game. And then, of course, Leanne Baxter's double overtime 88th minute finish to put that game away, giving them their 5th title, first since 2002. The Rams, the big story, but Madison winning the Liberty District was also huge. They came out of nowhere and pulled off such a great victory in such a tough district this year. Chantilly had all juniors and sophomores and freshmen this year, so they'll get everybody back, including Cortland Bristol and friends, Katie Menzie and more. They're ready to tear it up next year under Coach Melissa Bibby. A lot of good soccer to be played out there and a lot of good teams coming back, including South County and W.T. Woodson, guys. So I'll tell you, never a shortage of talent from the Northern Region in so many sports. We always, in this region, seem to have some kind of state champion lingering at the end of the season.
Well, guys, I have a special place in my heart for softball. I also have a special place in my heart for Loudoun County, which I started covering when I first came into this area. And the Broad Run girls softball team, just another dominating performance. They have not lost in 2 seasons now, winning their 2nd straight state title. Caitlin Delahaba is just a fantastic pitcher, nationally ranked team.
Got to mention the George Mason girls soccer team wins the single A tournament. Frankly, they went through a tournament run where they were just untouched, got through a PK win in the semifinals, and then took an easy win in the final.
Paul has a soft spot in his heart for softball. I have a soft spot in my heart for Chick-fil-A sandwiches. So I want to give kudos to the Westfield people for taking good care of us at the state tournament. It was hot as blazes, but we had all the Gatorade, Chick-fil-A, anything you think of. They did a great job.
Francis Dolan Company did a fantastic job. I know BJ loved those cold towels straight from the refrigerator.
You got to thank the good people at Westfield. They treated us so well. It was such a hot day, all of them in great spirits. In fact, it was a 2-day deal for them, Friday and Saturday. And as difficult as a time as we had, they were running a tournament that had a lot of people coming in and out. They really just did a fantastic job. I don't see any reason that tournament would ever go back down south. Certainly hope it does. I mean, we don't have to travel. So anyway, guys, thanks for joining us for this state championship edition of the Fairfax Sports Report. Before we roll out, let's thank the folks that make this show possible. You can find out more about them at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. That's right, we're on the web, audio, video, bells and whistles, and more at fairfaxsportsnetwork.com. CCI Screen Printing is one of our stellar teammates at 703-978-0257, or click them on the web at cciscreenprinting.com. Triple Edge Lacrosse, one of our special teammates here, helps us get through our Triple Edge Lacrosse coverage each week. Want to thank D. Stu and all the boys that do a great job at Triple Edge Lacrosse. Of course, we want to finish this season by saying thank you to all the folks that tune into this show every week, all of our cast, crew, and more, including Jim Respress, Matt Wallach, Craig Sturbutzel, John Pinchett, and Fat Boy Photos. Go check them out for more photos you see here on this championship edition of the Fairfax Sports Report.